In the opening verses of Paul's letter to the Philippians, he writes to the Philippian church about his gratitude for their shared involvement in the ministry. He says, "I thank my God in all my remembrance of you, always offering prayer with joy in my every prayer for you all, in view of your participation in the gospel from the first day until now." One of the critical marks of Christianity is the willingness of God's people to cooperate together in kingdom endeavors. My church is a part of the Southern Baptist Convention. The SBC is defined by cooperation more than organizational structure or any of the things that bind other denominations together. The Southern Baptist Convention is a convention of churches who have voluntarily associated with each other because they know that together we can accomplish more than we can apart. Last week was the annual Southern Baptist Convention meeting held in Dallas, Texas, and I want to share with you the state of Southern Baptist, the good, the bad, and the embarrassing. Let's talk about that. As 11,000 messengers or representatives or delegates came together last week in Dallas to review the reports of the various entities that function as the cooperative part of the Southern Baptist Convention, we did business. In our polity, Southern Baptist messengers are representatives sent from churches. They gather once a year and they provide approval and produce instructions going forward for the various entities and agencies of our convention to do over the course of the next year. The Southern Baptist Convention is essentially made up of an executive committee, which is the organizing administrative body that operates the Southern Baptist Convention for the other 363 days a year outside of the Assembly of Messengers in the annual meeting. You have the Executive Committee, you have the International Mission Board, which is responsible for missionaries around the world, everything except North America. We have the North American Mission Board, which is responsible for church planting in Canada, the United States, and Mexico. We have the Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission, which is the political lobbying branch of the Southern Baptist Convention. It is located in Washington, D.C. And then we have 6 theological seminaries scattered across the country. Southern Baptists do theological education really well. In fact, if you were to compile a list of the top 10 largest theological seminaries in the world, all 6 Southern Baptist seminaries would be on that list. Nobody trains pastors and church leaders the way we do. Now, let me start with some negatives. Maybe you've heard about this in the media. The media almost always gets the Southern Baptist Convention report wrong because they don't understand our polity. Polity is the word to describe church governance. Most denominations serve a top-down structure where the denomination makes decisions and they instruct the churches. Southern Baptists are the reverse of that. Because of our serious commitment to the autonomy of the local church as taught in the New Testament, Southern Baptists are a bottom-up organization. The entities of the Southern Baptist Convention are supposed to serve the churches and follow the direction of those messengers or representatives that meet on an annual basis. The media doesn't understand this, so every time the convention does something, they start talking about how the churches are going to be forced to change or do this or do that. So you have to discount most reporting regarding the SBC from mainline media sources because they just don't get us. But let me talk to you about some problems. First of all, we offered a vote this year to require our entities to supply to messengers on an annual basis what we call 990 level transparency. Now, Form 990 is typically an IRS document that secular nonprofits are required to file with their tax returns. It includes information like the salaries of the top 5 positions over $100,000 in an organization. It includes things like overhead costs, the ratio of donations that actually go to what they were advertised for. It's an accountability document. Now, Southern Baptists don't have to file those tax forms to the IRS, but the motion was made that they produce that level of information for the messengers. The reason for that impulse is because in the last few years, there are some of our entities that have become very secretive about their statistical summaries and particularly their finances. Unfortunately, that motion failed. Why would it fail? It failed because Southern Baptists are traditionally conditioned to trust our leaders. That's not a bad thing, except that when our leaders appear to not be responsive to the people to whom in our structure they are supposed to answer, then it becomes a problem. One example is the North American Mission Board. This is an organization with nearly $200 million in annual budgetary expenses, and yet they give us very little detail about where their money is spent. They don't tell us about the number of church plants that they make on an annual basis. They don't tell us about the survivability rate of those church plants. They don't tell us if after 4 years those churches are still thriving. They don't tell us if after 10 years those churches are contributing back to denominational ministries through the budgets of their churches. And when we're spending $200 million, you'd think it would be fairly important that we have confidence as messengers that not only the money is being spent appropriately for the ways Southern Baptists who give the money expect it to be spent, but also that our strategies are actually producing what we mean for them to produce. If we were growing in church plants, if we were thriving in the ministries that we're trying to establish across North America, you would expect that that would be information that would be trumpeted. And yet, it's all kept in closed books, and we're not given that evidence. In fact, the instruction to the messengers is, well, you have trustees, the trustees represent you, just trust the trustees. Well, here's the problem with that. The trustees work for us. Kevin Ezell is the president of the North American Mission Board, and I would like, in a public setting like Truth Currents, to say that I have no confidence in the North American Mission Board until Kevin Ezell is forced to resign as president. Here's why. There was a motion made a year ago at the convention meeting in Indianapolis, and at that meeting, the messengers sent a request that was referred to the North American Mission Board that they provide more information about specific things like church planting rates, survivability rates, the very kinds of things that I've talked about. And this year, a messenger stood up during the North American Mission Board report and asked the president, Kevin Ezell, he said, Dr. Ezell, that motion was referred to the North American Mission Board a year ago, but the answer to that motion hasn't shown up in your book of reports that you've presented to us. It didn't show up in your oral report. We've not been given that information anywhere along the way. And in an historic moment of disdain for the people that he answers to, his answer was, well, a recommendation is really just a suggestion. And we looked at that and decided that we refused to respond. Excuse me? I mean, who out there would go to your boss when he says, hey, listen, I need you to give me this information about your job, and say, well, you know, I take that as just a good idea, and I've decided not to move forward with that. What would happen there? I've never seen an agency executive dismiss the will of messengers like this man did. We have serious problems with the North American Mission Board. We also have serious problems with the executive committee. A new leader there who's been there less than a year is Dr. Jeff Orge. The executive committee operates or administers the Southern Baptist Convention throughout the year, and they are also not only extremely secretive, but they are, in my mind, making decisions that work against the will of the messengers. Now, we don't have to go into a lot of detail there. Leave it to the place of saying that as a pastor of a growing and influential church, I've lost confidence in those two leaders, the North American Mission Board and the Executive Committee. Our third problem is the Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission. Our political lobbying branch in Washington, D.C., while I will credit them with being solidly pro-life, they have been actively involved in the abortion debate, and yet, even in pro-life issues, they have argued against full abolition, and they have gone with a more incremental approach to abortion lobbying. They've also, to their credit, argued for the full federal defunding of Planned Parenthood. There's no reason why an organization with multi-billion dollars of revenue should be taking $500 million in tax money from taxpayers. I give them credit. Those are positions that I agree with. The problem is the Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission, influenced by, Potomac fever, the desire to be liked, the desire for influence among the movers and shakers. I don't know what the motivation is, but they have advocated for a number of positions in recent years that are in direct opposition to the vast majority of conservative evangelical and Southern Baptist churches. Somebody asked me at the convention when I voted to abolish that agency, a vote, by the way, that failed only 56% to 44%. Now, they will say, the ERLC is saved. We voted to keep them in place. But I'm telling you, a pastor in a church that only has 56% support, he would probably resign because he knows he can't pastor the church that way. The ERLC should have received a wake-up call at this convention that 44% of messengers voted to abolish the agency. One person asked me, if we abolish the ERLC, we'll have no voice in Washington. I said, that's right. But I would rather have no voice in Washington than to have a voice in Washington that claims to represent me while advocating for positions that I, in good conscience, cannot support. Well, we didn't get our 990 level transparency. We didn't get the abolishment of the Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission. We didn't pass a constitutional amendment to put our Constitution in line with our confessional statement that the role of elder in a church, senior pastor, is reserved for men only. There's been a big deal made about that. Southern Baptists approved the possibility of women as pastors. No, that's not what we did at all. What we did was we have a doctrinal statement that says pastors should be men, and we simply meant to add an amendment to our Constitution to make our constitutional instructions to the Credentials Committee, who chooses to seat messengers on an annual basis. We wanted to make their instructions in our Constitution match the doctrinal statement of our confession. We failed to do that. Why did we fail? Well, on all of these questions, I think we failed, first of all, because of, like I said, the traditional characteristic of Southern Baptists to bend over backwards to trust their leaders. Secondly, there are parliamentary hindrances to doing business in a convention setting. We have a denomination of 13 million members, 46,000 churches. We are the size of all the mainline churches in America combined. The largest, the most influential Protestant denomination in the world. But you have to understand that an organization that size doesn't turn on a dime. It's more like an ocean liner that takes many miles to make a U-turn. So there are parliamentary hindrances to some of these things that we wanted to do. And I think, frankly, Southern Baptists have lost the stomach for much in the way of denominational disagreements. But the numbers that I saw, for example, 44% voting to abolish the Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission, the numbers seem to indicate that despite our distaste for argument and debate, the sentiment of the convention in general is moving in a direction that represents my views. Now, those are the problems. What are the positives? The positives are Southern Baptists celebrated with the International Mission Board the sending of 58 new missionaries to the nations, bringing our number to closing in on 4,000 missionaries around the world. We also have 1,606 missionaries in the pipeline on their way to appointment in future years. It is a positive thing that Southern Baptists, who basically came together in 1845, originally to provide a missionary sending agency for churches in the South, we are still doing global missions better than almost anybody else, certainly on a larger scale than almost every sending agency in the world. Southern Baptists are biblically sound and socially conservative on the slate of resolutions that we passed this year. I was deeply impressed at the resolutions that we made, because this year's resolutions included resolutions decrying sports betting and its dangerous impact. We approved a resolution asking for a complete ban of pornography in America. We established a resolution that promoted legal protections for gender, marriage, and family issues, particularly protecting women's spaces from biological males who have invaded those spaces under the guise of transgender ideology. We've spoken to the moral evils of chemical abortion pills and the dangers of the way they are freely dispensed now. And we passed a resolution on the promotion of international religious freedom, which has proven to be timely given the kinds of events that we see happening right now in the Middle East and in Africa. Just this last weekend, 150 Christians in Nigeria were massacred in their church by Muslim extremists. We've pledged our support for our government to put pressure on other governments to guarantee religious liberty. All of those theological and social positions are very conservative, biblically sound, solid analysis and commentary on the great issues of our day. When people say Southern Baptists are fussing again, understand this. We are arguing right now primarily over administrative issues, over financial reporting, and those kinds of ethical practices related to the distribution of information to messengers. We are not debating theology. We are solid theologically. In fact, that translates into our 6 Southern Baptist seminaries who, by and large, to a man, are doing a great job effectively training pastors and teaching theology in a theologically illiterate generation. We celebrated at this convention the 100-year anniversary of the 1925 convention, which was a seminal moment in our history. In 1925, a couple of major things happened. We established what we call the cooperative program. The cooperative program is a unified budget that allows churches from the largest churches to the smallest churches to contribute to a unified budget, and that budget is voted on by the messengers on an annual basis, and the funds that come into that centralized clearinghouse of a budget are then dispersed according to the percentages approved by the convention. It is a financially efficient way to do business on a scale the size that Southern Baptists have to operate. Plus, it allows our smallest churches. You can be a part of a church in a little rural town, and maybe you have 30 people that attend on Sunday morning, and yet your cooperative program dollars are a part of sending those 4,000 missionaries around the world. They're a part of providing theological education through 6 seminaries. The cooperative program is a brilliant idea, and it's 100 years old this year. The second thing that happened in 1925 is that we passed the Baptist Faith and Message, our confessional statement. Now, it's true that in 1845, when the Southern Baptist Convention started, we didn't have a confessional statement, but we didn't need one because when we started, we didn't really start as a full-fledged denomination. We started primarily as a collection of churches that came together to cooperate in the creation of a missionary sending organization. The churches that were a part of that by and large, all had confessions of faith. They were a part of local associations that all had confessions of faith. There was no need, it was felt, to do something on a national level because those churches that were cooperating together had already declared their theological faith. 80 years later, in 1925, the convention had grown to enough churches, to enough different agencies and institutions, that it was felt that at that point, a confession of faith was necessary to define the size of the umbrella so that those who are cooperating could have confidence that we are working from the same biblical perspective. The 1925 Baptist Faith and Message was right in the middle of the fundamentalist modernist controversy. The Scopes Monkey trial had occurred in 1925. And so it was a recognition that given the great events of the day, Southern Baptists needed to declare what they believed. In 1963, we revised the Baptist Faith and Message. And by revised, I mean we really added to it because of the great theological issues of that day. The Supreme Court ruling against prayer in public schools, the establishment of evolution as the standard science curricula in America. There were those kinds of social issues that led us to say we need to further define what we believe. It's not that the first statement was incomplete in any way, but confessions are living documents and they grow as we have to define the parameters of orthodoxy given the different situations we're in. We revised the Baptist Faith and Message another time in the year 2000 when we added, in a prophetic kind of way, we added an article related to gender and marriage. Well before the passage of the legalization of homosexual marriage, well before the public introduction of transgender ideology, Southern Baptists were already speaking biblically to what we saw on the horizon. And it has given us a document that has guided churches through the kinds of things that have happened in recent years. Those are things we're celebrating. We're doing theology and biblical understanding very well. The cooperative program is a brilliant administrative model. The Baptist Faith and Message is a useful confession of faith that our institutions and our churches can access to provide guidance for who we are. Our resolutions, including, I forgot to mention, in that resolution on gender and marriage, we also became the first major Protestant denomination in America to call for the government, to call for the Supreme Court to undo the Obergefell decision, which legalized homosexual marriage. We want biblical marriage back in its place. Well, all of those things are good. What does our church do to respond to this? Well, the first thing we do is we stay Southern Baptist. We're committed to the cooperation of being a part of the global endeavors for the gospel that Southern Baptists share. Like Paul, I thank God for the participation of my Southern Baptist brothers and their churches in the gospel right up until now. We are still a Southern Baptist church. To the negative, I have lost confidence in the executive committee. I have lost confidence in the Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission, and I have lost confidence in Kevin Ezell and the North American Mission Board. We contribute significantly to the cooperative program. In fact, our church is the number 4 cooperative program giving church in the state of Oklahoma, and we are in the top 200 cooperative program giving churches in the entire nation. We will not reduce our cooperative program contribution by $1, but we have focused our monies to the places that we have confidence, meaning that we are supporting our 6 theological seminaries and we are supporting the International Mission Board. And until such time as we see appropriate recognition of the requests of the messengers who are the authority structure in our denomination, we will not be sending money to the ERLC, the North American Mission Board, or the Executive Committee. Somebody said, aren't you against church members designating money in their offerings to the church? And my answer is absolutely, that's true. But here's the difference. Here's why it's apples and oranges. The church is God's chosen strategy for changing the world. To designate money in a church in a way that is meant to sidetrack leadership is a rejection of the God-appointed leadership in a church. Rather than designate money, if you can't be under the authority of the pastors in your church, you need to go find another church where you can rest under that authority. This is different because a denomination is not a church. The North American Mission Board is a $200 million a year corporation. They provide a service. Now, it is a Christian gospel kingdom service, granted, but they provide a service, and we contract with them by our support for them to do what we've asked them to do. Refusing to support the North American Mission Board until they get their house in order is no different than Christians who say, I can't give my money to Disney, I won't give my money to Coca-Cola or whoever else. To withhold money from corporations is a different animal than designating money in anger in the life of a church. We want to be cooperative. We want to be a part of what Southern Baptists are doing globally. But we are responsible to God for the way our money is spent. And until we have confidence that our money is spent well, we will focus it in those areas that we still do have confidence in. Overall, I'm glad to be Southern Baptist. I'm glad to be a part of this kingdom endeavor. I'm not discouraged. I simply understand that in order to bring change to an organization this size, it takes patient effort, debate, conversation, and prayer. But I believe, despite major concerns, I think we're moving in the right direction. So we will stay engaged and we will play our part as long as we can, because the participation together in the gospel is to the glory of God. This is Truth Currents.